Chapter 754, Invitation. Klein had already walked through Bishop Electra's last question before, so he said with a sigh, "It was my father. He was a truly wise elder. Unfortunately, he passed away many years ago during an accident." When he said that, he infused the original Klein's emotions of losing his parents, him being in an alternate world with no home to return to, as well as the scars that resulted from his time in Tingen City. He sounded calm and wore a slight smile, but there was a sorrow that lasted forever that remained hidden deep inside. "I'm sorry for your loss. He must have entered the holy residence of the goddess, sleeping peacefully under her watch." Bishop Electra answered sincerely as he formed the sign of the crimson moon on his chest. Without waiting for Dwayne Dance to respond, he looked at him and invited him. "There will be a moon mass the day after tomorrow for the deceased. It will help him sleep in the goddess's nation and receive eternal peace. I wonder if you're interested in participating." The Church of the Evernight Goddess didn't have many festivals, and the most important one was Winter Gifts Day. The second most important was the Mass held during the full moon, also known as the Moon Mass. The rest were just normal masses and prayers on weekends. However, different dioceses and different cathedrals had their own patron saints and angels, which would have a corresponding special festival for them. "I would love to." Klein stood up and bowed, saying it from the bottom of his heart. This gave him the perfect excuse to interact with the bishops and priests of St. Samuel Cathedral, or even the diocese bishop. He had a firm foundation for entering particular regions in the cathedral. Meanwhile, he came to realize why the Evernight pathway was interchangeable with the death pathway. Both wielded the authorities of serenity, eternal sleep, and darkness. It represented the end and a destination. Following that, Maury Macht didn't continue the topic regarding Dwayne Dance's identity and background. It appeared as though he had only been asking in passing. He and his wife, Rihanna, began idly talking about their vacation experience in Daisy Bay last year. Having filled the gaps on this by staying there for 2 days, Klein replied with a native tone as he shared his thoughts on the Daisy specialty, roasted fish. During this process, he also pretended to unintentionally mention his hunting activities while he was doing business in West Balham, and how he was extremely familiar with the primitive forest over there. This was to build up the necessary foundations for the second layer to Dwayne Dance's identity. Furthermore, West Balham was different from East Balham. The colonial factions from Lone and Intis were on par, allowing for frequent conflicts. Even the actively controlled regions would experience changes from time to time. To investigate the activity trajectories of a merchant or adventurer wasn't easy at all. This was even more so the case when Dwayne Dance was likely using a fake name. As for his hunting experience in West Balham's primitive forest, Klein didn't randomly fabricate stories, nor did he plagiarize articles from the magazines or newspapers. He used what the Fog Sea's strongest hunter, Anderson, had previously mentioned regarding his glorious deeds as a blueprint. He drew on the details and abandoned the main storyline. What he fabricated was partially true and fake as well. Upon hearing the thick anacondas, man-eating fishes, and flowers which could capture their own prey in the forests, Rihanna would let out gasps from time to time, looking afraid but also eager to know more. As for the Member of Parliament and Bishop, they were equally interested. They often had to force themselves to interrupt Dwayne Dance's description to ask about the details. "You really are an excellent hunter. Back when I was serving in East Balham, I never had the chance to enter the forest. I never expected it to be this dangerous." After this extremely dignified middle-aged gentleman finished his tales, Maury Macht picked up a tiny piece of velvet cake and praised sincerely. "I wish to invite you to go hunting if there's a chance in the future." As they conversed, a maid had delivered the afternoon tea pastries. A male servant served them from the side. Upon hearing Member of Parliament Macht's semi-serious invitation, Klein replied with a smile, "I'm already looking forward to it." After chatting a little more and discussing Backland's pollution control, the 3 guests suggested they take their leave. As they had only acquainted themselves and weren't considered familiar with each other, Klein didn't retain them. He sent them to the door with his valet, Richardson. As he watched the bishop, Member of Parliament, and his wife leave, Klein's smile slowly disappeared until there was nothing left. He was rather pleased with the progress he had made. Bishop Electra was directly related to the Church of the Evernight Goddess, which was the main goal for him to return to Backland. Maury Macht was a discharged soldier and a member of Parliament at present. Without a doubt, he belonged to certain military officer clubs, and he would be beneficial to his continued investigation of the Great Smog of Backland. Next up, I should slowly deepen our relationships. Klein returned to the small living room and saw that the maid had taken away the remaining pastries and tea. He originally planned on having a little more. Regardless of the other types of food, the pastries and desserts in Lone, especially Backland, were outstanding. As for the cook which Dwayne Dance had hired, he was skilled in that. Even Ma'am Rihanna was filled with praise about it. Klein also agreed from the bottom of his heart. Retracting his gaze, Klein didn't say a word as he steadily walked to the staircase that led to the third floor. Before dinner, Butler Walter finally returned to the house and briefed him on the situation regarding the 10% of Backland Bike Company's shares. "Sir, we are lucky enough. Someone had hired a professional lawyer and accountant to investigate the situation of the Backland Bike Company, and they had offered a price to the seller before the advertisements were published. But in subsequent negotiations, the price exceeded the buyer's expectations. He had no choice but to give up. This way, we don't have to wait for the investigation report. We can directly hire that original team." Klein nodded and asked without hiding anything, "What's the current bid?" The buyer that gave up had offered £6,000 with a bottom-line price of £7,000. The seller didn't divulge the situation about the other buyer. However, from the feedback from various channels, it's at least £8,000. £8,000. Not too bad. Should I raise it a little more? If I were to raise the price a little and the other party just gives up, wouldn't it be awkward? Klein nodded slightly and said, "Give me the corresponding report. I'll consider it." After flipping through the report and having dinner to accentuate his extravagant but brilliant image as someone who did solid work, Klein turned his head to Richardson and said, "Prepare the two-wheel carriage. I'll be making a trip outside." He originally imagined that Richardson would ask him in surprise. A two-wheeled carriage didn't seem befitting enough, but to his surprise, his valet answered politely after flashing a curious look. "All right, sir." Submissive and never asking why. That's also considered an advantage. Klein sighed inwardly as he waited for Richardson to return to help him wear his coat. After getting on the two-wheeled carriage, he directly instructed, "Let's circle around the Backland Bridge area and East Borough." Richardson still didn't ask about his master's motives and just got the coachman to steer the horses carefully. As the carriage passed through Sherwood Borough, it arrived in the Backland Bridge area under the illumination of the street lamps. Klein didn't give a destination, and he only got the coachman to meander through the nearby streets. He leaned against the carriage wall, looking out at the streets. He saw pedestrians in old clothes, walking along with tired faces as though they were in a rush to return home for dinner after a hard day's work. Occasionally, there would be the ringing of a bike passing by. They were fast as they shot into the distance. In comparison, the riders' expression appeared more lively than the pedestrians. They seemed to beam with an indescribable sense of pride. It's an obvious difference in class. Although it's the difference between a technical worker and an ordinary worker, with the difference in weekly salaries of £1 to £2 to those with £1 a week. Klein slowly exhaled as he subconsciously looked up at the sky. At that moment, darkness had already completely covered Backland's skies, but the smog wasn't too serious. One could see through them and see the twinkling stars. After the Great Smog, the management of the environment is improving by the day. However, the situation with the lower-class workers in the East Borough hasn't significantly improved. Although their salaries might be higher and their working hours have improved, due to the large number of people surging in, prices have risen across the board, reducing the effects of the salary hike. The improvement in working hours have just gone from 15-16 hours to 11-12 hours. They're just fixing the problems with the greatest problems. As for the other problems that didn't rear their ugly heads, they're neglected. Yes, the kingdom is still undergoing reforms. Many things haven't been straightened out. Klein watched as his thoughts drifted until the carriage left Sherwood Borough. On the future, Admiral of Stars, Katlia stood behind the windows in the captain's cabin, watching Frank Lee pushing wooden barrels into the shadows. He was putting unknown things into it before closing the lid. He's recently been researching the growth of plants in dark environments. Why did he suddenly become normal? Katlia frowned with suspicion, often worrying that Frank Lee would create some huge invention. I'll get Nina to ask later. Just as she had this thought, her spiritual perception was triggered. She turned her head to see a letter on her desk. As a faint smile curled on her lips without her realizing it, Katlia walked over, tore open the envelope, and unfolded the letter. She quickly read through it. There are 2 Obninsks that do not belong to the Church of Storms, swimming north from Sanya Island, towards the Abyss Maelstrom. Find the direct descendant of Abraham family. You did well. Abyss Maelstrom was the name of a dangerous area at sea, and not the Abyss. Abraham family. Katlia thought for a moment, and without any clues, she planned on asking at the next tarot gathering. The next morning, after divining again if he should raise the price again, Klein said to butler Walter, "Hire that team and continue the negotiation. My bottom line is £9,000. All right, sir." Walter then immediately said with an apologetic look, "Something happened at home, and I wish to have half a day off." "No problem, do you need any help?" Klein asked gently. "Thank you for asking. I can handle it, and it's not too urgent. I will first handle the matters regarding the share negotiation first," Walter said sincerely. Klein didn't ask further as he nodded, and permitted him to take time off. After his butler left the room, Klein turned to look at Richardson and asked, "Did Walter meet anyone earlier this morning?" Mr. Butler received a letter. Richardson replied without hiding anything.